It is time now to connect to Congress, a segment where we talk directly to Washington lawmakers that represent us here in the Central Valley. This morning, we're talking to Republican Representative, California's 4th Congressional District, Tom McClintock, live from Sacramento. Good morning, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Hey, let me ask you, one of the big things is on everybody's minds right now. Everybody's watching what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. Do you have any information you can share with us about that situation?
I'm not sure any new information. I mean, for my part, I see no American interest in Ukraine that would justify going to war with Russia. I mean, the easiest way to defuse the situation is simply to declare that Ukraine is not going to become part of NATO. There's no reason for it to be part of NATO. That is the crux of the situation. So take it off the table.
What would you say to those that will argue in return that then you're allowing Russia to dictate who can be in an American alliance?
Well, the point of the matter is Ukraine's never been part of that alliance, never should be part of that alliance. And from the Russian standpoint, that poses a national security risk for Russia, just as it would if Mexico were suddenly to join a treaty alliance with Russia or China. You know, Bismarck once said that if nations want to avoid war, they ought to avoid the pinpricks that lead to war. I think that's wise advice in this situation.
Inflation is something that everybody's dealing with now. The price of everything seems to be going up. What's Congress doing to help with this?
Well, the classic Congress is not doing anything to help with. Congress has created it. The classic definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. And that's entirely a matter of government policy. That's all the spending bills that the Congress has gone wild with in this administration over the past year. The left shut down the economy. They then flooded it with trillions of dollars in so-called stimulus. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. You know, it just turns out all of that free money that the Democrats sent out, turns out it's very expensive. December's 7.5% inflation rate means that if you earn $50,000 a year, the government just took $3,750 of your purchasing power. If you manage to set aside $100,000 for your retirement, the government just took $7,500 out of that. There's only one way to bring inflation under control. You've got to increase productivity, that is, get off the economy's back, and at the same time, stop spending money we don't have. The Democrats are doing exactly the opposite.
Do you see any issues at all where there is bipartisan support so something could get done?
Well, yes. I mean, there's still many issues where you can see a bipartisan path forward. For example, on the House Judiciary Committee, there's an emerging bipartisan movement on such things as copyright and patent reform, drug reform. Under the Trump administration, we had a major bipartisan agreement on sentencing reform. But I'm going to be frank, on the major questions of our day, that is freedom versus big government socialism, that's not going to be resolved in Congress until it's resolved among the American people. Congress is merely a reflection of the American people.
What about the pandemic? Can Congress do anything there, or is Congress working on anything that could help us with this pandemic and or prepare for the next one that's coming down the pike?
Well, again, COVID didn't take a wrecking ball to our economy or close our schools or order Americans into home detention. Bad government policy did that. And for what? These draconian measures didn't save lives. Study after study confirms there's no difference in the spread of the disease between jurisdictions that shut down everything and those that stayed open. But as many of us warned, these measures actually cost lives through increased suicides, drug and alcohol-related deaths, delayed health treatments, delayed health screenings, poverty-related deaths. They did incalculable damage to the lives of our children, whom the science told us from the beginning were virtually unaffected by COVID. And by the way, a shout out to the students at Oak Ridge High School in El Dorado Hills who just walked out in protest of the mask mandates, and kudos to the administration for then lifting the mandate.
You're a ranking member of the Immigration and Citizenization Subcommittee. Can you tell us what you're working on now?
Well, as the ranking member, I've been tasked by the Republican leadership to develop a comprehensive package of measures that will secure our border, enforce our immigration laws, and close the loopholes that the Biden administration has used to encourage and aid and abet the largest illegal mass migration in our nation's history. And now what we have to do, we've got to resume deportations, court-ordered deportations that Biden ordered suspended. We have to resume and finish the border wall. We have to resume the Remain in Mexico policy for asylum claims. And then in addition, our package ultimately is going to include provisions to mandate E-Verify to prevent the hiring of illegal aliens, increase penalties for hiring illegal aliens, forbid citizenship to those who've broken our immigration laws, defund sanctuary cities and states, deny entry to asylum claimants who pass through other countries, and to institute visa overstay tracking. The objective is to settle this issue among Republicans this year so that we can quickly pass it next year when we have a majority. Our failure to do that last time is what set the stage for what we're seeing now.
Congressman McClintock, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.